Dun, 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 dun.
That's going in the show. All right. I'm going to hit the record button and then we'll just roll right into it. Okay.
Go for
Sounds
it.
good.
Welcome to the Agile Chicago Style podcast. Here is your host, Rick Waters.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Agile Chicago Style podcast. I'm Rick Waters. I'm here with my co-hosts, Marchi and Matt Beam. How are you, gentlemen?
Excellent. And you?
Pretty good. It's a Friday. It's beautiful outside. Not raining for once and not snowing. That's awesome.
That's key. That part's key.
I just saw, so our good friend, Howard Sublett, who was on the last episode, he just sent out a tweet this morning showing that in Denver, they're having like an ice or a snowstorm or something.
I saw that. Yeah. Brutal.
Yeah.
Well, Denver, but I mean, still difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? I want to introduce to our audience someone who our audience may not regularly expect to come in contact with. Our guest for, I was about to say this week, that would be a total lie to our guests and to our
It's
audience.
a week. It's a week.
It is definitely a week.
Yeah.
But our guest for this episode is Dr. Chris Coultas. Chris, did I get your last name right?
You did. Spot on.
All right. How are you?
I'm doing well. Glad to be here. Thanks, Rick.
All right. Yeah, just to reiterate, we're just recording audio, not video here, even though we can actually see each other. This is just an added benefit for our part. It helps us helps us be able to conversate with you if we can see you.
Not a word.
Yeah. I wasn't going to say anything.
Sorry.
Well, Chris, I'll give you a little bit of an introduction, but definitely there's lots more to be said about you than I can put into some ad hoc thing that I just threw together at the last minute. So if you want to add on, absolutely jump on. But for our listeners, Dr. Coultas here is I'm going to say, inventor of a leadership report and related reports that focus on human psychology and the ability to possibly predict behaviors. And this report is called the DRiV. There's lots of other stuff that's going on in the works. So, Chris, do you want to give us an idea of what's going on?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for calling me Chris. You don't have to call me Dr. Coultas.
Sure.
So myself, alongside the rest of the team at Leadership Worth Following, we're a leadership consulting firm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I'm not the sole inventor, can't take credit for that. But basically, what Rick is referring to is it's an assessment an assessment called the DRiV. And what it looks at is the things that drive your behavior and drive your psychological motivational energy. So it's looking at those behaviors, those values, those motives that, push you towards certain things or kind of drive you away from certain things. And so it all starts there. And so as psychologists, as coaches, as consultants, we want to help people understand the why behind what they do, not just what you do, but why you do it. Because once you start to really get to the root cause of what you're doing and where your energy goes, where your burnout goes, where your engagement goes, you're much more equipped to do the root cause analysis and real action planning versus just kind of describing yourself and saying, well, this is who I am, go kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't want to don't want to speak for Mike and Matt, but I'm pretty sure the three of us, I know I have, and I know Matt said similar things, but the three of us, I think, are fairly familiar with lots of sort of self-assessment tools that tell us about who we are, kind of open up our eyes into what we might or might not have already observed about ourselves. But what I really think is really, really interesting about the DRiV report is that it actually explains behaviors that we either have recognized in ourselves or haven't, and exactly what you were talking about, what drives, and I don't know, I'm not sure if we're still using the term what drains us, but
100%.
yeah, what I really got out of the report and a follow up class on, really how to analyze these reports is that you've got a lot of data and a lot of information behind that backs up the report on, how can we dive into the behaviors that drive and drain us, and then sort of take a look at our interactions with other people and sort of do that, just like you said, that root cause analysis on, why did the conversation just go like it did? How did that interaction, how did that relationship go, all those years ago? Or why did it go that way? That sort of thing. I don't know. Am I interpreting it wrong?
No, you're spot on. So we use it with our clients, and Rick, you got certified on the tools. That was kind of the class that you're referring to. But so you'll use it with your folks, your teams, and whatnot. But yeah, it's one of the things that we use it for is to help people get a better understanding of why they do what they do, what they're likely to do, both in normal situations and in stressful situations. And really, what we found is that when you're able to have some clear language around this is why I do what I do, and not when you're able to really understand it and have that clear language, you're better able to take control of your choices and your actions versus just kind of living reflexively. I think that, and I'd love to hear y'all's perspective on this. But this past year with COVID and with work from home and with all of the changes and whatnot, I think it's clearer than ever that when you're in a space of change and in a space of newness, we all tend to fall back on some of those reflexes that maybe we're not even aware of. And we're all seeking kind of the things that give us energy, and we're seeking to avoid the things that drain our energy. But if you're not aware of that, you're just kind of living reflexively, and it ends up stressing you out a lot more than things need to, because again, you just get kind of whipped around by your own reflexes and by the environment. But when you're really able to pinpoint, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, this is why I'm responding the way I'm responding, you're able to have much more thoughtful reactions versus reflexive reactions.
Boy, that what you said, Chris, about the last year, really, it does remind me of my experience. I'm just looking at my report that Rick created for me. It looks like I'm high in insight and low in productivity. And I can tell you, as a guy who has a lot of task lists and has tried every project management, personal OmniFocus and reminders and things, and I guess really the question, so it's very valuable I looked at this report and I was like, yep. Yep. But I guess the question I've got is, so these tendencies are not really destiny, right? It's just what you tend to do. Because it's easy for me to get into a mindset where I'm like, well, I'm just never going to be that productive, right? I'm never going to get done as much as I could get. Every day I tend to beat myself up about the stuff I didn't do. And so I guess, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing one of the ways I could use this is to say, look, here's what I tend to do. In fact, I think some of the language in this actually says, be more mindful about how you use your attention, right? Break stuff up into 15. notice when you change tasks or change focus. So I'm guessing a lot of the value in knowing this stuff is so that I can adopt some sort of compensatory strategies. Would that be roughly correct?
Yeah, yes, exactly. And I'm so glad you brought up the productivity aspect of things, because so the model has 6 factors, and if we want to get into the details of that or talk about that in a minute, we can. But one of the 6 is productivity, and being high doesn't necessarily mean you will be more productive, or being low doesn't even necessarily mean you will be less productive. It's talking about the energy that you get when you're executing tasks, and kind
I
of
see.
how you'll maintain that. So for you, it totally makes sense that those product or those task management, project management, those kinds of things don't really resonate with you, because that low productivity approach, the only way you're going to stay energized while you're executing tasks is if you have the freedom to be flexible and jump from one thing to the next. That's the only way you're going to be able to sustainably get stuff done. But of course, the watch out that comes with that is jumping from one thing to the next so quickly could mean that things fall through the cracks.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, my experience emotionally with dealing with these project management is that it's just a constant reminder of how much I haven't gotten done. But I do need like there's something deep inside me that is really phobic about getting stuck into some, like, I hate routine. That's one of the reasons I love coaching, is because every day is different, right? But I hear like what you're saying. So I'm never going to have a high drive to do this stuff. But if I just get more efficient in how I execute stuff, I can actually get more out of whatever drive I have. Would that be a way to think about it?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways. So I like that word compensatory you used a minute ago, and in terms of how you get more stuff done. So that's where you start to really drill into the nuances of something like this, because so if I'm looking at some of the other things, I have your report up in front of me,
Oh,
and I think you're also, if I'm looking at the right one here, you're also pretty high on enjoyment, and and that's one of the kind of
yeah.
sub aspects of productivity,
That does
right?
sound like me. Yes.
Yeah. And so one of the other things that you can think about is, it's not necessarily just about like, how can I be more efficient? That is a big part of it, right? Because you don't want to get stuck just doing one thing that feels routine. But the other thing is well, how can you find ways to make the things that maybe are routine more fun?
Interesting. Yeah. No, that's great. Sorry, guys. I didn't mean to make this about, my own personal therapy session, but it is I've looked at, other, and I don't mean to invoke your competition, but there are other models. And every
Yeah.
time I take one, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see how it's interesting to see. It does sort of explain, basic tendencies. So it's fascinating to look at.
Yeah, I don't think those other models would be very popular. We wouldn't know their names if they didn't correlate with something we've already recognized about ourselves, or could, if we weren't introspective and somebody called our attention to something, they wouldn't be so popular if they didn't work a lot of the time, or at least didn't illuminate something that's true about us.
Yeah.
What I like about this is, actually, in the report, there's so many things that are suggested. Hey, concentrate on this, maybe concentrate less on that, and that sort of thing. Take more time doing this, spend less time doing that. Instead of just saying, yeah, you're an introvert, you're an extrovert. You're going to find probably stronger relationships with these types of people rather than these types of people. I like this because it's got something for you to work on. And just so everyone knows, this DRiV report over time, it's just gotten better. In fact, I believe, Chris, if I'm not mistaken, over the last year, the report is like doubled in size, hasn't it? You've added, like, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 more pages, right?
Yeah. So the report started out as more of like as almost strictly a self-awareness kind of thing. So it highlights, what you'll look like at your best, what you'll look like at your worst, and some coaching questions to consider. And so, we've used that a lot with our coaching clients and whatnot. But then we've also recently updated it to include behavioral action items. And so, Matt, you were asking about different ways to apply these insights. And so rather than having this just be something that helps you spark self-awareness, which is always super helpful, but we've also incorporated some of those behavioral action items so that when you get these insights, you can get a better sense of, okay, well, based on this driver or this trainer, I can pursue this activity to help me keep my energy boosted, or I can reframe or think differently about a certain thing so that I can better tolerate something that might irritate me or drain me. Or maybe I just need to go, maybe I do need to go build a skill and practice something so that, it's something that drains me, but I just have to do it. And so, uh, you know, Matt, you were talking about the project management kinds of things. That makes a lot of sense that you were seeking out those kinds of things. And who knows, maybe there still is a technique out there or a skill out there that you can add to your toolkit. I don't think the point would never be to turn you into someone who is hyper rigid and hyper focused about executing and you get tons of energy from that.
Yeah.
But there may be a skill out there that makes focused execution less painful for you.
Yeah, I really need to go through this thing and actually think through I think the behavioral recommendations are super valuable because I can really think through how I currently structure my day, how I think about it, and like what changes I could make. Because, as a coach, I don't want to speak for Rick and Mike, but I'm guessing we spend a lot of time thinking about stuff that's actionable for our clients, right? It's not. Theory's great, right? Sometimes you need to understand the context and put it in a way to understand it. But if I don't know what to do, it's not nearly as valuable. So I love that part of it.
And I want to be fair to Matt here, Chris. Matt just got his report, even though it was done months ago. Matt just got his report today. I never went over it with him. I never had a coaching session with him or anything. So today, like I don't know, a couple of hours ago was the first time he saw it.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah. Whereas I took mine a while ago, and I think I got my results back in February. And we went over them together, and that was actually pretty insightful. Like when I read through the report, the PDF file that came, I'm like, okay, yeah, I get that. And there's a lot of correlation with things that I know about myself and things that I've seen from other assessments. And I was going through, and there were just a couple places where I kind of went, okay, well, maybe that's something I don't understand about myself. And I just kept going through. And I think there were two places like that. And then Rick and I did a curated session where he went through what his observations were. And there were and Rick and I have worked together in the past. And so he had some experience to draw upon of things that he knew from the way that I work. But there were areas he's never had a chance to see. And so he was, the thing I really liked is we went through the report, and he's like, okay, now this part here, I don't have any experience with how you react in this, but if I were to look at this, I would say you would do X in this situation as opposed to Y. And that seems weird to me. And then I'd say, well, actually, that makes total sense to me. Yes, you're right. I would do X instead of Y. And this is why. And we ended up going through a dozen different scenarios in this where I had experiences that I could draw upon to illustrate some of the observations that were there. And then I think the one that unfortunately, it looks like me and Matt had a lot of the same ratings, at least in the big drivers, at least what we're high and low on. So I can't go to something different, but there was this one point at which Rick goes, well, according to this, you are you are looking for a legacy, but you're not focused on wealth. You're not focused on getting things back. And he goes, and that seems weird to me. And I go, well, it makes sense. I totally get that. Is I want to make an impact. I want to leave a place better than I find it. I don't need to get credit for it, right? I just need to know that it got better, and that I helped do that.
And specifically that one, I liked when I was in the class with Chris in learning how to use the tools. I like Chris. I don't know if you remember the example you gave when you explained that, but it had something to do with you want to leave a legacy, but not necessarily have your name on the side of a building or something like that. Do you remember that example?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we talk about is, people are driven by legacy, but one of the cool things with the tool and really digging into it is some people are driven by legacy. They need this long-term impact, but but their definitions of what a meaningful legacy and the kind of legacy that matters is can differ wildly from person to person. And I think a lot of times we find that there are the kinds of people that have like that financially focused legacy. And so it's maybe not even about themselves, but it's, I need the stability to build for my family. And that's the legacy I'm building. Some people do have that kind of big, grandiose, I want a Wikipedia page written about me. I want my name on the side of a building. I'm donating so that I have a hospital wing named after me. A lot of time, and then some other people, it's very altruistic kinds of legacies of, I coach people, I develop people, I build these really big, meaningful relationships. And for me, what motivates me is knowing that, 20, 40, 50 years from now, no one's going to remember me, but I have this legacy of people that are, that were developed by me and that were connected to me somehow.
Yeah. There was one point when we were going over it, 2 points. It was ironic because, I remember when I went through it, I went, I don't know if that matches, right? Mm-hmm. When we got to those parts, Rick goes, all right, so here's an interesting thing, is the score you got in this area, the same number can mean two different things. And I chose the one for you that was the most popular, or the one that most people aligned to. He goes, and he read it, and I went, well, that's the one that I kind of went to, right? And then he goes, well, the other side of the coin would be this, and he read it, and I went, that's the one right there. So I think overall, I think that the assessment did a really good job of pinpointing the things that drive and drain. And, you were talking earlier about when you've got something that drains somebody, based on past experience that I've had going through other conversations like this. Sometimes you can't get better at the things that drain you. It's just, they will always be a drain. It's just, maybe you can approach them in a more creative way, or sidestep them, or work your way around them. And knowing that you've got a blind spot there means that you're not going to beat your head against the wall trying to punch through that. You're going to use one of your other strengths to try to get beyond that. Mm-hmm. That's the way I like to look at it. Because I don't like, I got a low productivity skill too. I think it's a race. All three. I think it's like a race to the bottom.
It's amazing that we were able to get it together to do this podcast, honestly.
I know. Well, and how often do we do it?
Exactly. The frequency speaks to that, right? I mean, the three of us, I'm just comparing insight and productivity. Among the three of us, we all have high insight, low productivity, relatively low productivity. Yeah, Matt, you are on the extreme low productivity scale.
Oh, come on.
I just don't care. I just can't make myself care.
Or not Matt, Mike. Mike is not Mike.
Is it?
Yeah, it's Mike.
Yeah. I think I got to have the win on that.
That's
one.
about as low as you, almost as low.
There's only one score lower, unless you can go 0.
Can you go 0?
You can go 0.
Okay, 2 scores lower. All right. Something to strive for.
So it does suggest that the instrument is, and I'm way over my skis here, valid. Because I think we are not to suggest that it wouldn't be valid, but we are similar people, and so I would expect to get similar results. Maybe and this is a question that it's not really fully formed in my head, Doctor. Maybe you edit this out. But is there anything you'd like to say about the instrument itself, the psychometrics of it? I'm really fascinated by these different models of human consciousness. People are so complex, and like how you model the consciousness in a way that, like with these different, I imagine there must be some logic diagram that you guys created that if this question this value, then this question that value. Anything you'd like to say about? I don't even have a well-formed question here, but anything about that?
Well, you're playing a dangerous game, asking an unformed question of the guy who actually was the primary developer, because I could, talk for 4 hours on that unformed question. But I will try to give you
time.
Yeah, I will try to give you what I think is the most interesting minute or two response to that, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Cool.
So I think there's maybe 2 or 3 things there. One is what we do with this model is, and one of the things that differentiates maybe from other assessments is a lot of other assessments will kind of model human behavior based on like 1 or 2 components of things that might motivate or drive behavior, or correlate with behavior, I guess is maybe a better term. And this is actually a growing trend in the personality research space. So in personality research, back in the day, at least, there used to be this kind of mentality that personality is a thing. Like it's a static thing that just kind of exists and it explains who you are. There is a growing trend in this space of 2 things. First of all, looking at the things that actually make up personality. That's called the personality dynamic framework, and also the idea that personality can change over time. So to make that a little bit less academic, basically the idea is that there are things that actually logically make sense that comprise your personality. And just to give you a little bit more insight into the DRiV, we follow a similar kind of logic there. And the premise is that personality isn't just some kind of mystical thing that we try to measure. It actually is made up of your behaviors, your thoughts or your cognitions, and your motives or your attitudes or your affect. So there's a behavioral, an affective, and a cognitive component to your personality. So just to use creativity as a quick example, and then I'll just stop and hear reactions here. But what the DRiV does is we look at all 3 of those angles, not just one, to really understand what's going to drive your behavior. Because, again, to use creativity as an example, it's one thing to say, I often find myself thinking of new ways of doing things. That would be a behavioral thing. It's another thing to now add on, I truly believe a new idea is better than an old idea. That's the cognitive angle. And then to add the affective angle, I really like it, or I get like a buzz when I hear a new idea versus when I have to implement an old idea, something like that. Those aren't the actual items, but you see how those 3 are different.
So does that help you control for what I'm guessing might be a contextually dependent or sort of circumstantial expression of some of these things? Like you can sort of triangulate away, just like if you just measured in one context, you might have a lot of thoughts about being creative, but you don't behave that way in a different place.
Exactly. You can kind of think of it as like a stool, right? A 3-legged stool. And if they're all moving in the same direction, either towards or away, you can be more confident that that's actually going to be consistent across situations. Whereas, if I do it, but I don't like it, or I don't do it, but I do like it. It's going to be a lot more situationally dependent if it's more of like a moderate score.
Interesting.
So one thing that since all three of us have a lower score under productivity, I feel almost that what we're really talking about here, when you say low productivity or low score in productivity, you don't mean non-productive people, right?
Correct.
It's just is it more the tendency or the strength of the thing that drives people, or because there's dimensions within productivity, right? And you go up and down based on within those. And so the productivity ones are alignment, excellence, persistence, and enjoyment. And I think we're probably high on enjoyment, even though we're low. Although maybe that's it, because that's one of the ones that's got the star on it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Where the higher you are or the lower you are on this, the higher you are, and so forth. Is that just you guys chose to go with the word, an enjoyment word, and you were really measuring the opposite of that? Like, I don't know what the opposite of enjoyment is. Misery.
Driven by misery. Yes.
I've known a few people who I think are driven by misery.
Yeah, I guess that. Yeah,
Usually
that would be more of a
manager.
I think that would be a clinical assessment if. So two things here, and so to answer the first question, you're right. A low score again does not mean that you're going to be unproductive. It's really looking at two things. One is, do you get energy from being kind of the personal executor of things? Like, I love having things on my, so let's do a case study here, because I'm like a 99 on productivity. So for me, and this is a great example, because as we were prepping for this podcast, I emailed Rick and I was like, should we have a brainstorming call first to prep for this call? Should we outline something so that I know what to think? So I know
should have been able to look at my report and know what my answer was going to be.
I was putting my shirt on 2 minutes before I joined the call.
Yeah,
that's how prepped I was.
So it's more of that. The style, really, and the energy you'll get or drain or lose from a certain approach. And so, if I was to come in and say, guys, I just can't be on this call unless we have a prep call, unless we have an outline, you guys would be really irritated and may not even. It may have just been like, nope, sorry, not going to have you on the call.
So another. Go ahead, Rick.
I was going to say, just speaking to that may actually be one really significant nugget of information that could have helped us over the past 15 years. The people, I'm serious.
Because there are people who want that, right?
And won't work without it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's significant. I know what I'm looking for now.
So understanding that that's a drain. And saying some guests may need that or want that. So maybe we meet them in the middle and say, well, we'll do a little bit of prep work.
I'm not even thinking about the podcast. I'm thinking about people we coach.
Well, that too.
But also,
no, I'm surrounded by those people right now. We're having words. It's fine.
But on the podcast front, just to give you kind of a quick example, that may be something where, like, for example, if you had like a prep form or something where you only had to do the work once, right? Mm-hmm. And if your guests want to fill out the form to help them get their thoughts together and help you guys prep, then you only have to do the work once. And then if they want to, they can. If they don't have to.
Yeah, we got to make that clear, because because if we give that form to us, we'll look at that. I would look at that sheet and go, I ain't going on this thing. I'm not. I'm not doing that much homework. That's not.
I'll wing it. I'll bring a ton of insight.
We could just have every single guest take the DRiV, and we already know what we're going to end up with.
There we
go. By the time we get on the call. So.
Hey, maybe we could just program the whole podcast then. Like, we'll be able to tell how they would answer the question, and we would know what questions we'd ask, and it would be fun.
Here's what Chris really wants to tell you. So
Then we can
There you
start
go.
putting out. We could just pick random people out of the world, and we could do a podcast every day.
But then, Mike, how would we showcase our connection?
Poorly.
poorly.
Yes.
Matt, you were going to say something. I cut you off.
No, that's totally fine. It just struck me that there's another instrument that I took. Another reason why I can see that this is valuable. The way a different thing described it was people who are like you don't do well in jobs that are routine or rote or sort of pre-structured, and you just come in and you do what was set up for you. You tend to struggle in those environments. And I looked at that and I was like, you have no idea. I ran from those jobs.
I think they do, and that's why it's on the thing. Because I don't know about Mike, but I mean Matt and I, one and the same here. I realized it took me a very, very long time to realize that aspect about myself. I don't like walking into the same job every single day. I mean, yeah, I teach basically the same 3 classes for work all the time, but every single day at work is different for me. And that's how I like it.
Yeah. When people ask me why I'm into coaching, I'm like, it's the most multidisciplinary thing I can think of. It's got human behavior, psychology, statistical process control, organizational design, from technology to humanity to like a flow, like all of this, like any direction you want to go deep into, there's just like a ton of stuff to learn and apply, and every situation's different. It's the opposite of routine. So,
and ultimately, we were there to make a difference, or there to help make change happen and help enable that capability within their organizations, and that's where we see our value, and we try to go places where they think of it that way.
Yeah.
Spoken like the highest meaning person on the team. It's perfect.
What else could I say?
Speaking of which, Chris, did you end up getting time enough to take a look at us as a team?
I did. Yeah, I pulled some of your data together and ran a couple of numbers here. So yeah, should you want to kind of dive in and just kind of talk through some of that stuff?
Yeah. Can you explain first what we're talking about, the team report? Because we haven't talked about the team report at all.
Yeah, so I did run the team report, which basically just looks at the 3 scores y'all three's reports integrated together and looking at means and standard deviations and all that fun stuff, but giving insights around some of that stuff. So I ran the reports, and I also ran a couple of extra stats things just because I'm high productivity and couldn't resist doing more prep work than I needed to.
We appreciate it.
That's great. Yeah. We will give you some insight on that when you're done.
I'm sure we'll find some meaning in it.
Yeah, we'll find something somewhere. But yeah, so basically what I did was, and I can send you all the reports after the fact if you want, but what I did was I looked at the 28 drivers across the 3 of you guys, and I looked at where you may have, or where you do have lots of overlap, and also where there's big differences. And I kind of like to think of it because as a coach and a consultant, I like to challenge people and like to look at it from a continuous improvement lens, and that's maybe part of my high excellence. I don't know, but I shy away a little bit from the strengths based angle sometimes, and I go right to what could be better. So we can talk about the strengths of the team too as we go through this. But all that being said, when I look at the overlap and the differences, I think of this in terms of blind spots and then tension points.
Mm-hmm.
And so a blind spot is something where the team is very, very high or low, and also very similar, right? So we're driven and or drained in exactly the same way. So we have shared blind spots.
Everybody's missing the same thing at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the tension points are going to be areas where overall the team still feels very strongly about something, but there's lots of variance or there's a big differences within the team. So we can let's talk about the blind spots first, and then we can talk about those tension points first or next.
Yeah.
So when I looked at the data within just these three, within you guys three here, a couple of blind spots here, and I'll throw them out, and then you guys know the assessment, and let's just pick on one or two of whatever resonates most with you. But the 4 blind spots I highlighted in looking at the data were caution. So you guys are all really low on caution. So that means you're really like collectively super optimistic, but there can be blind spots there. Creativity, so caution, creativity, compliance, all very low on compliance, and authenticity, all pretty high on the authenticity side of things. So caution, creativity, compliance, and authenticity. So before I take up too much of the airtime, like diving right into how I might interpret that, with you all having at least varying degrees of exposure to the assessment, of those 4, what kind of jumps out to you guys as possibly being a blind spot within this podcast team?
I'd say the caution thing, because we kind of in what I see as caution being low for the 3 of us is literally throwing caution to the wind and just saying, let's try something. And we don't really care if it works. Let's give it a shot, instead of taking time to deliberate. Deliberation is one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. Taking time to deliberate on what maybe the risk might be in doing something. I think that all 3 of us are probably, hey, that's a good idea. Let's give that a shot. And if that doesn't work, there's lots of other different ideas. We're all high on creativity. There's lots of different ideas here that we can explore.
So we're high on creativity, high on authenticity, low on caution, low on compliance. I can see low on caution. See, now I'm going to look at it this way. That's a good thing for working without a script, because we're not worried about making fools out of ourselves. If we stumble, we're going to adapt, and we're going to, okay. Some of us worry less than Rick does.
All of us.
But the and in terms of compliance, that goes back to what Matt was saying about feeling like you're boxed in certain situations, and I share that. I was not very good when all I was supposed to do was follow the rules. So
yeah,
I helped them make new rules.
So how would we operationalize? Because I love this idea. So let me just give you a story. Earlier today, I was with a coaching client, and she was talking about a thing on her team. She's got a role on the team that is about helping the team understand and deal with stuff that comes up on the team. And she had this other person in another important role who was behaving in a way that was really troubling, like was not working out in the team. And so my sort of instinct was just to say, do you know why? Like, what is she thinking? What is she feeling? Do you have any idea what motivates her? But she was trying to find a structural way to deal with it. And I was like, if you can dig into the personal, like, what is she thinking in the moment that might help you be more effective? It strikes me that this could be very useful in different situations. And so you could really, what you're saying here is you can understand like how to deal with basically, given that people have the personalities they have. We're not going to change their personalities. We can come up with ways or approaches. Not all interventions and coaching approaches are equally sort of effective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is going to help us understand what would work and what would tend not to work, right? So with us, it looks here like deliberation drives me and caution drains me.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
How would you? Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you think about that in the context of this team? I'm trying to understand how to play with these concepts, right, in a real sort of life situation.
I bet deliberation is going to be one of them tension points, isn't it?
Bingo. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, and that was I was going there next. And so, I mean, this is my first interaction with the three of you as a collective here. And so, I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about your team context and whatnot. But so the deliberation is going to be, or it can be, a tension point because Matt, you're going to want to move a little bit more slowly, or at least need a lot more kind of details and like data really when you're making decisions, whereas Rick and Mike, with both being low on caution and deliberation, they're going to be even more kind of comfortable with some of that. Although on the Rick side, I think, Mike, you mentioned Rick maybe is the worrier of the group in some ways. And even though you're low on caution, you're still twice as high as the rest of the group. And so I think that you see some of that play out even just within the three of you.
Gotcha.
That's funny. I do like to think through stuff. I spend a lot of time thinking through decisions and just, but the number of, how many times, Rick, has it been like, so when's that episode going to get uploaded? Are you going to do that thing? And then boom, it's already uploaded. He's done it. I love it. Bias for action, right? But a different way than how I think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were talking about your list of jobs to be done. Hey, it's just as easy to throw out a list as it is to and start over as it is to find that one thing that somebody wants done and do it. So yeah, I don't know, but yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, please go on with the tension point.
Tell us why we are an awesome team.
Tell us more about what makes us tense. I know. I want to hear what the other ones are besides the deliberation.
Yeah, so you've got deliberation, and then growth, status, and persistence showed up as some of the other tension points. So deliberation, growth, status, and persistence. And so why don't we just do kind of what we just did? What of those four there? I guess we've already touched a little bit on deliberation, but so beyond deliberation, what kind of resonates with you guys as being something that really
I want to know which of these guys cares about status, because it's not me.
Yeah, it's not me either. Rick.
Yeah, I specifically, if we're just talking about status here, that totally speaks to me dedicating a lot of my career just towards making it to become a certified Scrum trainer. I think that was fairly obvious. I'm gonna expect Chris as a PhD. His is going to be up there too, right? Is your status really high?
Well, so first of all, not all PhDs are driven by status, but yes, mine actually.
Go on, doctor.
Yeah. Hey, I told you guys not to call me doctor, so
I'm sorry.
Oh man,
how long did you deliberate that?
Yeah.
Well, and that makes total sense, Rick, because I've had I've thought about getting different accreditations. So there's a bunch of things you can do in the Agile coaching community. I haven't not done any of those yet, and it's not that they're not valuable. It's just it didn't make it up to it didn't make it onto one of those project management things I was using at the time. Probably because we look at them differently. It's not, and none of these are good and bad, right? It's not. It's just it's how we tend to move through the world. It's what we orient towards that accelerates us or tends to slow us down, I guess, really is the bottom line, right?
Yeah, and they can become more or less helpful based on your context and also based on how much you emphasize them. So I'm actually doing some research on burnout, and which I know is huge these days with COVID and all the changes and work from home and all that kind of stuff. And so, like, for example, I've found that that status actually is one of the ones that that can drive burnout. If when you overemphasize it, similarly with competition. And the psychology behind that is with both status and competition, there can be the temptation to tie a lot of your energy and your happiness and your definition of success to how you compare to others. And if those comparison points shift wildly, there's always going to be someone who's more successful than you. There's always going to be, and if that frustrates you a lot, right, then you're going to burn emotional gas less efficiently than a low status person or a low competition person who is just like, okay, I'm fine with that. Someone's always going to be better than me. That's okay.
It's interesting. That is a topic I woke up this morning wanting to talk to you about, but knowing we only had an hour to talk. So I was like, there's something very specific going on in this country right now. And I was wondering if it's the effect of extreme burnout under tense working situations where people literally, and this will kind of clue you into what I'm talking about, people are literally going postal, a lot lately. And I'm wondering if that's due to burnout, really tense situations, either at home or at work, or the blending of the two. But not the focus of this podcast. And you probably don't even have enough time to go into that now. So I don't know.
Well, it looks like Matt was jump. Yeah.
I just want to jump on that because Rick, I was thinking about meditation and mindfulness. These are things that I've been thinking a lot about, practicing somewhat. I wonder how maybe that relates to Rick's question. Like, how do you think about that in the context of this?
Yeah, and Rick, to your point, maybe not to invite myself on again, but maybe if we want to have a follow-up one, like really unpacking burnout, then let's talk about that. But just to give kind of some quick thoughts on that and how it relates to meditation and mindfulness and whatnot. So burnout is comprised of three factors, and so I think this will answer your question a little bit, Rick. You can start being burnt out through exhaustion. So I literally don't have the energy anymore. You can start being burnt out through inefficacy. So no matter what I try, I can't make any progress. I can't make things better. And cynicism, which is more of that like overarching pessimism. And it's like, there's no light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing. And so you have exhaustion, inefficacy, and cynicism. And with the drive, and I think how it relates to mindfulness and burnout, there's a couple of things. First of all, I do think that some of these research findings that I'm sharing around the drive, just those correlations, I do think that they highlight just foundational drivers or drivers of possible burnout. So I overemphasize status. I overemphasize, not failing. I can't forgive myself, and I hold grudges, and I burn emotional energy because anytime someone frustrates me, I exhaust myself, thinking about revenge, or, I get myself into these negative loops where I become more cynical. And so you can pull out some of these insights just by looking at your drive as is. And you can highlight some of those watch out points, but then Matt, to your point around meditation and mindfulness, I think it also highlights when I'm starting to feel exhausted, what are some things I could do to help me re-energize? If you think about like burnout being losing your emotional gas, and drivers are a source of emotional gas. Well, let me go get some of the gas that works for me.
It feels like this is sort of recalling the behavior, thoughts, and motives sort of categories. They're somewhat relevant here, are they not?
Yeah, and so to that point, and that goes back to that whole you asked about like consistency and consistency across situations. One of the things I like to encourage people to do is if they see a moderate score on their report and they're kind of surprised by that, sometimes that means that Normally this would be really high for me. It's surprising. And of course that could just be they misunderstand it, but it could also be that they're not getting enough of it. And, maybe there is an opportunity to go get some more of that, or they're getting too much of something that does drain them. And there's a way to maybe offload some of that. So yeah, I don't know if that really answers your question, but
no, it does.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, on that, where you said growth was one of the tension points, and for me that was middle of the road. So where's the tension coming from for here?
I'm high
on growth.
Yeah, I'm high on growth.
Nothing better.
Yeah, Rick and Matt are both high, and so I did tee that I tee this up as
Dude.
Oh yeah, high on growth, not just high.
Clarify.
What are you growing?
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So the possible tension point would be around that, and of course, just because there's a mathematical difference doesn't necessarily mean that'll always manifest in team dynamics. But one of the things that can happen with that, especially in like more formal like work teams that are like pushing constantly on something, with growth for like specifically, what might happen is you start having your high growth people that are always chasing something new, and they have these like really grandiose expectations around anybody can do anything, because as long as they have a growth mindset, they can learn and change and grow and develop. And so that's kind of that super high approach. And that can end up frustrating some people who are lower on that, just because it can be seen as like unrealistic or lacking in pragmatism.
This one though, Matt, can I go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. If I'm not mistaken, Mike, growth here for you, that was the one I was unsure about. It was on the low side of the middle of the road, just barely low.
Yeah.
And this is the one where he said, I actually tend towards the other side. So just to let you know, that I think that was the one.
Okay.
Go ahead, Matt.
I'm just thinking about a training I saw a couple of years ago at a client where they were talking about the growth mindset, and this was an Agile coach, and they were trying to, it's about transformation and trying new stuff. And so they were, I'm sure you've heard of the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. And I'm just wondering, like some of the people I was just observing, I wasn't facilitating, but I remember looking at some of the people in that room, and I could tell it was not landing the way it was intended to land on some of those people. I wonder if they would score low in growth, or if that's a different thing. Like, is that a valid way to think about that?
Or an abundance of caution.
Yeah.
The growth driver is kind of related to growth mindset, and we're coming up on time here. I unfortunately do have a hard stop. So maybe we should continue this conversation. But just real briefly on that, the growth driver looks at kind of that optimism towards others' development, but it also indicates that that kind of effort that you put towards your own development, and so it's that kind of meta approach to growth. And so sometimes, like later in people's careers, that growth driver can actually go down, just because it's like I know what I need to know, and I just don't have the time or drive to go add to that knowledge.
So even though we were trying to help, it might have actually not been appropriate or helpful for some of those people to be hearing that message. That's super. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that sounds, interesting. Okay. Sorry. I know we got to go.
All right. Yeah. So, Chris, I know you've got a hard out. So why don't we wrap here and invite you back at some future date? Again, everyone, I want you to take a look. Dr. Chris Coultas, one of the leaders over at Leadership Worth Following, and one of the main contributors to the DRiV report and all of its related reports. So thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Rick and team, guys. It was great to meet you, and glad to be on here.
That was fantastic.
Nice meeting you.
Absolutely would love to have you back.
Totally.
Awesome. Let's do it.
The three of us have lots of questions.
If we can get our stuff together, we'll do it.
I'll build a form for you guys to send back to me for me to fill
Just
out.
tell me where and when.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Thanks. Take care, guys.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
You too.
All right, bye.
All right. And for everybody else, thanks for listening, and we'll talk at you again real soon.